When martial ancestor Linghu spotted Hong Li, he didn't reveal the slightest change in expression. It was unknown whether he was hiding his emotions with his profound shrewdness or that he simply didn't recognize the past Foundation establishment disciple. Hong Li's gaze shifted to the others in the hall. At the center of the hall there was an old man with a purple face and a gorgeous woman in palace robes. When Hong Li swept his spiritual sense past them, his heart trembled. The two were mid-nascent soul cultivators, the main representatives of the 9 Nations Union. As Hong Li examined in the other cultivators in the hall, they had examined him as well. A majority of them were surprised by Hong Li's appearance as a youth. Hardly any male cultivators cultivated techniques for maintaining youthful appearances. The Drifting Cloud sect elder Lu called out to Hong Li with a smile, "Junior Martial Brother Hong, you've finally arrived. Have a seat." We were having a discussion with Sect Master Wu about the Mulan invasion. The child fire dragon also smiled and kindly nodded his head. Following suit, Hong Li smiled and saluted the other cultivators in the hall before taking a seat by his senior martial brother Lu. The purple-faced cultivator took a seat across from Hong Li and smiled. "So this is the Drifting Cloud sect as fellow Daoist Hong. I am the Enlightened Leaf sect as Wu Peng. We just heard from Brother Lu that fellow Daoist had entered nascent soul stage only after 200 years of cultivation. You truly a genius among the cultivators in the heavenly south. Perhaps you will be met with great success on the Great Dao." Although Hong Li's cultivation was still a grade lower than his own, he didn't dare to underestimate Hong Li's future potential. Sect Master Wu is being polite. I only managed to enter nascent soul stage from a fluke. I don't dare to speak of any future obtainments in the Great Dao. As the Enlightened Leaf sect were one of the sects that stood side by side with the Flowing Mind sect in the 9 Nations Union, Hong Li didn't dare to grow overly familiar with him and simply gave a polite response. As Hong Li spoke, his gaze fell onto the beautiful middle-aged woman that stood at the old man's side. Since the purple-faced old man was the Enlightened Leaf sect master, this beautiful woman was likely a cultivator from the Flowing Mind sect. As Hong Li began to ponder, the purple-faced old man, Wu Peng, sighed and said, "This is the Flowing Mind sect as Lady Qi. She will handle matters with regards to the 9 Nations Union along my side. The other fellow Daoists are." The old man gave Hong Li an introduction to the other cultivators in the hall. When martial ancestor Linghu was introduced, he simply gave a curt response, nothing out of the ordinary. Hong Li's heart faintly trembled, but he simply nodded. After introductions were finished, Wu Peng's expression grew tense. "Fellow Daoist Hong, you've come just in time. We were currently discussing how the vast power of the spell warriors are greatly beyond our expectations. I've already heard from the elder Yu and the others that they've already suffered a great defeat. Even 2 important areas are about to have their grand formations broken by the huge beasts the Mulan control. We have many casualties in the war against the Mulan, including even fellow Daoist one of the Shadow Form sect. He will be the 3rd nascent soul cultivator to have perished. There is a pressing need for assistance from all powers due to the overbearing Mulan assault." The smiles of all the cultivators present had disappeared once Wu Peng had solemnly spoken. A grave atmosphere immediately filled the hall. A green-robed old man with a sharp, thin nose solemnly said, "Sect Master Wu, we also have a bit of information ourselves considering we have sent our own disciples out in accordance to the pact. However, we still don't have concrete information on the true circumstances behind fellow Daoist Feng's defeat. Could Brother Wu give us a detailed explanation on the matter? It is unfathomable that so many nascent soul cultivators have fallen in such a short amount of time. Could it be that high-grade spell warriors have already begun to take action?" When Hong Li heard this, he took another look at the old man. From Wu Peng's introduction, he was an elder of the Devil Dao's controlling spirit sect. He didn't know whether or not he had a relation to Lu Yu or Han Yunji. Wu Peng responded with an odd expression. "We still don't have information on whether or not their high-grade cultivators are acting in full force. However, fellow Daoist Feng and fellow Daoist Xian were verified to have perished in a one-on-one battle. They were not surrounded." When the green-robed old man heard him, he revealed alarm. "Impossible. Even if they were defeated by a mid-nascent soul stage spell warrior, they would still be able to flee for their lives. Could it be that the Mulan divine sages have begun to act?" Already anticipating his question, Wu Peng readily said, "No, the 2 were only early nascent soul spell warriors. However, they were rather odd. Not only were their spirit techniques far beyond what other spell warriors of the same grade were capable of, They also used an incredibly strange treasure. Just as the two fellow Taoists manifested their nascent souls upon defeat, they were trapped by this treasure and were rendered incapable of using instantaneous movement, leading to their demise. The green-robed old man felt his breath run cold. He asked with slight disbelief, what kind of treasure is capable of stopping a nascent soul as instantaneous movement? Is it an ancient treasure? A magic treasure? The cultivators who listened had vastly changed expressions. The reason why it was extremely difficult to kill a nascent soul cultivator was because of how easy it was for a nascent soul to escape once it manifested. It came as a great shock to the cultivators present that there was a treasure capable of restraining a nascent soul. Our disciples that witnessed the battle weren't able to clearly see it, but when it was activated, it momentarily flashed with red-black light and seemed unblockable. Furthermore, Wu Peng trailed off with a hesitant expression. The green-robed old man unhappily said, "Fellow Taoist Wu, with matters having reached this far, what is it that you find hard to say?" The flowing mind sacked as Lady Qi smiled and spoke on behalf of Wu Peng. It's not that Brother Wu finds it hard to say. He only hesitates to speak because he feels that the matter is uncertain. Allow me to say it. As a fellow member of the Nine Nations Union, it was natural for her to assist him. Han Li grew greatly curious by their words. The others were also more or less waiting for what Lady Qi had to say. Lady Qi sighed and explained, "The disciples observing the previous battles have noted that the two nascent soul spell warriors appeared almost as if they were feeding off the souls of those who died in battle, regardless of whether the souls had belonged to spell warriors or cultivators. As a result, Sect Master Wu became doubtful as to whether these two spell warriors are actually human, instead being some sort of heretical transformation. But since the two didn't emit an obvious demonic or ghost chi from their body, the disciples were incapable of making any precise judgments. Of course, there is also the matter of the sudden appearance of the huge fearsome beasts that appeared amongst the ranks of the spell warriors. It seems to have something to do with the appearance of these new spell warriors. We suspect that the Mulan have begun to collaborate with other powers. This explains how they were able to invade the heavenly south on such a vast scale." The cultivators in the hall were all stunned by her words. In his alarm, Ancestor Linghu solemnly asked, "Not human? Lady Qi means to say that they are transformed demon beasts." Wu Peng solemnly said, "That should be the case. Even if they aren't demon beasts, they may be heretical cultivators that cultivate the ghost or demon dao. If that were the case, it'd be far more troublesome than encountering transformed demon beasts." Han Li's expression stirred as he slowly asked, "When did Sect Master Wu come by this information?" Wu Peng blinked in surprise and twirled his long beard with curiosity. "This information came from the report on the last battle." "Why does fellow Taoist Han ask this?" Han Li held his chin in his hand and pensively answered, "It's nothing. I merely felt that regardless of whether these unfamiliar spell warriors are men or demons, they have no fear of revealing their identity to us, given that they dared to act so boldly at the beginning of this war. It appears the Mulan will not be attempting a battle of attrition as they did in the past. They will most likely use thunderous strikes, seeking decisive battles with our main forces." Could it be that a great change had occurred in the Mulan Plains? Wu Peng and Lady Qi both glanced at each other with astonishment upon hearing Han Li's analysis. The other cultivators also grew solemn. It was quite natural that they picked up on what Han Li meant. In the past, the Mulan's invasions were always battles of attrition, with each war lasting years if they were short, but decades if they were long. Whenever this happened, both sides of the conflict had always avoided direct confrontations or their main forces, as it would only result in a Pyrrhic victory at best, with most of the forces on either side annihilated. Both the Heavenly South and the Mulan spell warriors had no such desire for such heavy losses of strength. This was further strengthened by the fact that the Mulan consisted of many tribes, as the Heavenly South were consisted of grand alliances of variously sized sects. Neither side were able to work entirely as one. But now, the Mulan were acting with overwhelming force, a vast change from their previous invasions. With the addition of those huge sage beasts and those strange spell warriors, the changes from the Mulan were clear to see. A long while later, Wu Peng bitterly smiled and spoke with a grave tone. "Brother Han's words are reasonable. It seems there is something amiss with the Mulan. We cannot be careless. The sects in the Heavenly South must form a second army to help the Nine Nations Union to resist them. Else, the Mulan will break through and shatter us. I hope you fellow Taoists will return quickly and explain this matter to your sects." The Nine Nations Union will not be able to hold out for much longer. After Lady Qi pondered for a moment, she said, although fellow Daoist Hong's words are very likely, they are still only a guess. I hope you fellow Daoists will discuss these matters only among other nascent soul cultivators in order to prevent an unnecessary chaos. However, if the Mulan truly wishes to have a grand confrontation, their divine sages will be certain to take action. These late nascent soul stage spell warriors aren't something we are able to contend against. I will be informing Elder Wei Will of this, and see whether or not the three great cultivators can gather together and deal with this matter. A shriveled old man worriedly nodded his head. Lady Qi makes sense. This matter is urgent. When we return, we will immediately inform our sect of this matter. The other cultivators also agreed, all knowing that the matter was grave. Afterwards, the cultivators began to discuss about a few particulars and decided to first send some reinforcements to slow down the Mulan, buying the various powers the time they needed to prepare. Hong Li, Senior Marshal Brother Lu, and the child Fire Dragon walked out of the hall side by side. When they arrived outside, Hong Li frowned. Elder Lu caught sight of Hong Li's expression and asked with surprise, "Is there something wrong, Junior Marshal Brother?" "It's nothing. There is just an old acquaintance that wishes to see me. I'm afraid that it will take a moment." "Senior Marshal Brother Lu, Brother Long, please go ahead. I'll quickly return." Elder Lu nodded his head and smiled. "Yes, of course. We'll first head back to have a discussion amongst the cultivators of the Heavenly Dao Alliance and then send information back to our Senior Marshal Brother. We'll see how each of our Alliance sects will handle the matter." The child Fire Dragon also responded with a smile. Hong Li saluted in response before slowly walking away. Elder Lu stood at the hall's entrance and glanced in the direction that Hong Li had taken. "Is there something that Brother Lu is worried about?" the child Fire Dragon asked with a mysterious smile. Although Elder Lu's heart was uneasy, he maintained a calm exterior. "Worried? What is there to be worried about?" The child Fire Dragon smiled and said, "Brother Lu should have already guessed. Fellow Daoist Hong was originally from Yellow Maple Valley, and that eccentric Linghu is nearing the end of his lifespan like your Senior Marshal Brother. As eccentric Linghu is the only nascent soul cultivator in Yellow Maple Valley, he may already be burning with anxiousness. While this might not matter to a smaller sect, to a sect as large as Yellow Maple Valley, the absence of the protection of a nascent soul cultivator could likely lead to a sect's extermination. It would be odd if eccentric Linghu was the one who had given Hong Li the voice transmission." Brother Lu didn't immediately respond. Instead, he pondered to himself for a moment before asking, "How does Brother Long know of Junior Marshal Brother Hong's origins?" "I do not recall mentioning them," the child Fire Dragon bluntly explained. "There was no need for Brother Lu to speak of it. Since you sect suddenly acquired a young newly ascended elder, our ancient sword sect naturally felt the need to investigate." Elder Lu had nothing to say in response, but after a moment, he shook his head and said, "Junior Marshal Brother Hong simply said that he was going to see an old acquaintance. If he originally intended to go back to Yellow Maple Valley, he would have already done so. He wouldn't have waited until now." The child Fire Dragon shook his head. "That may be true, but eccentric Linghu is a cunning old fox. Since you invited Hong Li over, he should have some confidence of convincing him." Elder Lu grew silent for a moment. Eventually, a troubled expression appeared on his face and he sighed. "Let us leave it to fate. If Junior Marshal Brother Hong truly wishes to return to Yellow Maple Valley, what can my Senior Marshal Brother or I do to stop him?" Hong Li stood in a small remote street and began to continuously observe his surroundings. He then caught sight of a two-story pavilion. It was only about 20 meters wide with a small banner at its entrance that wrote T on it. There were two yellow-robed Foundation Establishment cultivators standing there. Hong Li smiled for a moment before approaching it. When the two saw Hong Li walk over, they respectfully saluted him. "Greetings, Senior Hong. Martial Ancestor is respectfully waiting for you." Hong Li nodded his head and wordlessly entered. The entire building was extremely quiet, as if there were no one there. Hong Li hesitated before climbing up to the second floor. As a result, he found someone calmly waiting for him. He was wearing yellow robes and had a sallow complexion. He was Ancestor Linghu, who he has just seen previously in the hall. He was currently sitting at the octagonal table in the center of the room, and was currently sipping on a cup of tea. Hong Li's gaze flickered and he walked forward without hesitation. He silently took a seat across from Ancestor Linghu, noticing that there was a teacup that had already been prepared for him. Ancestor Linghu said nothing. He simply waved his and caused the teapot on the table to float. It poured some tea in the cup in front of him before floating back down. Eccentric Linghu narrowed his eyes and glanced at Hong Li. He slowly said, "The spirit tea here is good. Will you not give it a taste?" Hong Li smiled and brought the cup up his eyes, glancing at the clear green liquid within. Hong Li then took a sip and said, "It is quite decent. It is truly a grade higher than common spirit teas." Eccentric Linghu put down the tea and chuckled. He unhurriedly said, "It seems fellow Taoist Hong is also one fond of tea. It seems I was right to meet you here." Holding no intention to speak in circles, Hong Li bluntly said, "Surely you didn't invite me here only to sample this spirit tea. If you have something to say, then say it." This ancestor Linghu clearly recognized him. Hong Li could already guess why he was invited here. "Since fellow Taoist is so impatient, I want to speak in circles. Would fellow then be willing to return to Yellow Maple Valley as an elder?" Ancestor Linghu calmly spoke as if he were speaking of a minor issue. Return to Yellow Maple Valley. Hong Li didn't reveal the slightest change in expression and simply looked down at the teacup in his hand. A bright glint shined from Ancestor Linghu's eyes and he slowly said, "Needless to mention how you were treated wrongly in the past, I must tell you that my lifespan is running short. I only have 20 years more at best before I expire. So long as you return, Yellow Maple Valley will be yours. Surely you wouldn't have held onto some minor grudge for so long." Hong Li raised his head and stared at Ancestor Linghu. He shook his head. "I no longer care about the matters of the past. If I found myself in your position, I would perhaps do the same. However, I am currently an elder of the Drifting Cloud sect. I have no intention of joining your sect. Fellow Taoist Linghu, you had best find another cultivator." Ancestor Linghu coldly smiled. "Of course I know you've joined the Drifting Cloud sect. However, the Drifting Cloud sect still has 2 other elders. Do you not have to share control? Wouldn't you be happy to be the sole holder of power?" Hong Li pursed his lips, forming a faint sneer. "I believe you misunderstand. I didn't enter a sect for authority. I merely wished to find a suitable place for cultivation. I have no interest in control over a sect." Ancestor Linghu frowned, but he soon regained his calm. "Fellow Taoist Hong, doesn't he realize how beneficial is it towards your cultivation to be the sole power over a sect? Not only will you not have to trouble yourself to find rare medicines and materials, you will gain an incomparable status in the cultivation world. Moreover, don't you have the slightest interest in your past sect members? Many cultivators of your generation are still within Yellow Maple Valley. If there isn't a nascent soul cultivator to protect them, they may as well be extinguished in a single night by a coalition of other sects. Who knows what will happen to them?" Ancestor Linghu had finally begun to appeal to emotion. Hong Li smiled and carelessly said, "I have no lack of spirit medicines and materials as a Drifting Cloud sect elder. And how could I care for something as hollow as status and reputation in the cultivation world? As for the death of the sect, it had always been a common occurrence. No matter how long the sect existed, they eventually disappear with their legacy lost. As for my old sect members, I will not be involved with them. May fate treat them kindly." When Ancestor Linghu heard Hong Li's response, he frowned and didn't speak for a time. Instead, he slowly raised the teacup and took a sip. He then said, "Fellow Taoist Hong, this is obvious to me, but I am very much unlike you. I've spent over 1,000 years overseeing Yellow Maple Valley and I've grown extremely attached to it. I don't wish for its legacy to be severed once I die. It seems fellow Taoist has little interest in fame or profit. However, if fellow Taoist is willing to succeed the position as the Grand Elder of Yellow Maple Valley, I am willing to present my own riches to you, the treasures that I have collected over many years. They will be greatly useful to your future cultivation." After a moment of shock, Hong Li narrowed his eyes and asked, "You will leave your inheritance to me? If I recall correctly, you should have personal disciples." Ancestor Linghu coldly smiled. "Among my disciples, the highest only holds mid-core formation stage cultivation. If I leave my inheritance with them, it will only invite calamity. Even if fellow Taoist doesn't accept, I will not be leaving a majority of my treasures to the sect." Hong Li rubbed his chin and pondered. To tell the truth, Hong Li felt some temptation by Ancestor Linghu's words. However, he clearly understood that if he were to accept the position as a Yellow Maple Valley elder, he would likely have to face many problems within the 6 sects of Yu and the 9 nations union matters that would settle for quite some time. Furthermore, he would have more authority as the sole elder of Yellow Maple Valley, but conversely, he would be sacrificing the freedoms that he had with the Drifting Cloud sect. More importantly was the problem he would have when he faced the Masked Moon sect. After a long moment of thought, Hong Li shook his head. Many thanks for your kind offer. However, I feel that this matter should be mentioned any further. Ancestor Linghu was angered upon hearing this rather. His face only revealed helplessness. Ancestor Linghu sighed and said, since you've refused these conditions, it seems fellow Daoist Han is unwilling to be involved with the 6 sects of Yu. If that is the case, I have another proposal. Han Li's expression stirred with curiosity. Another proposal. Ancestor Linghu bitterly smiled. Since fellow Daoist doesn't wish to be an elder of Yellow Maple Valley, how about I give you free treasures in exchange for free requests for help from Yellow Maple Valley? Of course, these requests will be within your capabilities. After a moment of thought, Han Li quickly nodded his head. Free requests within my capabilities. I can accept those conditions. Ancestor Linghu wore a faint smile on his face and placed 3 items on the table. It seemed he had prepared them beforehand. Without another word, Han Li's eyes wandered onto the 3 items on the table. There was a small shiny blue shield, a red jade bottle, and a jet black jade pendant. Showing not restraint, he grabbed onto the small blue shield. When the small shield entered his grasp, it grew soft and light as if nothing was there. He examined it more thoroughly in surprise, still not knowing what it was refined from. Ancestor Linghu glanced at the blue shield with reluctance. There was an ancient treasure I acquired in my youth, and had accompanied me for a long while. I simply called it as the Blue Light Shield. Its abilities are powerful and is particularly effective at resisting the attacks of fire attribute attacks. You will find this to be true when you test it. Han Li stroked the shield for a moment before returning it to the table. From how strange the treasure appeared, Ancestor Linghu's words should hold true. He then grabbed onto the red jade bottle. In the past, I snuck deep into the Mulan plains and exterminated a grade 7 Iron Wing demon beast. That bottle contains its core, an incredibly rare material. It will have no shortage of uses. A grade 7 demon core. Han Li inwardly sighed, but he displayed no change in expression. Although grade 7 demon cores were extremely rare items in the Heavenly South, they were of little value to him. As a result, he smiled and opened the medicine bottle. After taking a glance at it, he put it back in its original location. His eyes then turned to the last item on the table. This time, Ancestor Linghu simply wore a strange smile instead of taking the initiative to introduce it. Han Li's gaze silently wandered around the jade pendant. After pondering for a spell, Han Li doubtfully asked, this jade talisman was something that was refined by ancient cultivators. A trace of surprise appeared on Ancestor Linghu's face. He curiously asked, fellow Daoist Han has seen a jade talisman before. According to what I know, these talismans were unique even during times of antiquity. They should be vanished in the Heavenly South, and even fewer cultivators of this land should know of them. Han Li smiled. I merely encountered a fellow Daoist that happened to know of these things. I heard of it from them. Ancestor Linghu glanced at the black jade talisman on the table and said, this jade talisman was something that I had risked my life to obtain. It is definitely valuable. Although I still haven't managed to grasp the proper way to use it and can only use a fraction of its abilities, the jade talisman's abilities are shocking. I've used it several times to strike down enemies. It should be a quality item that was meticulously created by an ancient cultivator specializing in talismans. Ancestor Linghu summoned the talisman into his hand and chanted an ancient and obscure incantation with muffled voice, transforming the jade talisman into a ball of black light. A bone-chilling wind then blew past him, forming a demonic black-red hand above Ancestor Linghu's head. This demonic hand shined with black-red light and was over a meter wide. Not only did it occasionally flicker within flames, it also carried an indescribable, eerie chi that filled with entire tea house with its appearance. Han Li's heart trembled upon seeing it. After I acquired this jade talisman, I spent several hundreds of years studying it before managing to use this single divine ability. Unless this profound ghost hand is attacked by a young type treasure, it will be nearly invulnerable. As for any magic or ancient treasures it may hold, their abilities will immediately diminish and they will obediently stay captured. Even top-grade treasures will have their might and spirituality reduced. As Ancestor Linghu spoke, he willed the large black hand to swell several times in size and grab a nearby table. Black ink flame silently swept past the wooden table and instantly consumed, leaving not even ash behind. Han Li felt his breath turn cold at the sight. This hand appeared like a profound devil ability to attack with manifested spiritual sense, but since the black hand originated from the Jade Talisman, there was no fear of any backlash from any harm the spiritual sense may experience. As for the strange ink fire, that should be a different divine ability. This Jade Talisman is certain to possess other divine abilities. Unfortunately, I don't have much time yet, and I don't have many more opportunities to discover its secrets. On the contrary, fellow Daoist Han still has much time to unlock its secrets. However, a majority of its power has already been consumed. You had best use it cautiously. Ancestor Linghu then pointed to the black hand and had it turn back into a ball of black light before flying back to the table in the form of a Jade Talisman. Han Li wore a smile, but he was very much interested in the Jade Talisman. Even if the talisman was as powerful as Ancestor Linghu had described, he would be able to learn much of the ancient cultivator talisman techniques from the Jade Talisman itself. It would prove to be of great assistance to him. Once Ancestor Linghu finished presenting the items, he swept his sleeve across the table and the 3 items disappeared, leaving 3 white translucent white jade discs in their place. Han Li turned his eyes towards Ancestor Linghu and calmly said, "These formation discs are magic tools that I had personally refined. They are incapable of being replicated. After you die, I will not decline a request that Yellowmaple Valley will have of me." Ancestor Linghu smiled and said, "Good. With these words, I will be able to continue on to other matters." Now that the matter was finished, Han Li took his leave as he had no further business there. Ancestor Linghu didn't offer much resistance and simply spoke a few polite words as he watched Han Li walk away. Once Ancestor Linghu was alone, his smile faded and he stared at the table, deep into thought. Han Li didn't immediately return to his residence once he left the tea house. Instead, he glanced at the sky and found a remote area before taking out the jade slip that the Heaven Peak Sect Elder had given him. After carefully reading it with his spiritual sense, he wore a hesitant expression. Han Li fiddled with the jade slip in his hand as he pondered. Then, with a flash of azure light, the jade slip vanished and Han Li began to walk in large strides towards the location it described. After passing through a majority of Soaring Heaven City, Han Li arrived at a remote corner of the city where an ordinary mixed goods store was located. This store had a black wooden sign on its entrance, reading the Jade Union Pavilion in large flamboyant calligraphy. Han Li examined it before slowly walking into the building. The interior was large. He only walked into a hall that was about 20 meters in length. A majority of the items being sold were common materials and talismans. To the side, there was an exquisite side door that led to the back. There was a middle-aged man in grey robes behind the sales counter near the entrance. He appeared to be looking through a small ledger. Han Li swept his spiritual sense past him and saw that his cultivation was very low, only in the realm of qi condensation. Furthermore, the shopkeeper's appearance was rather ordinary. The middle-aged shopkeeper immediately smiled and stood up upon seeing Han Li enter, and he quickly welcomed him. "Senior, what is it you wish to look at? My store is filled with all sorts of goods. It will definitely be to your satisfaction." Han Li smiled and he flipped his hand, revealing the green jade slip in his grasp. After he placed it in the shopkeeper's hands, the shopkeeper had a vast change of expression and he quickly placed it away. He asked with a respectful tone, "May I ask for Senior's name?" Han Li casually answered, "Han Li." So it turned out to be Senior Han. Martial Ancestor has already mentioned Senior Han would be coming, but I hadn't expected it to be this soon. "Please follow me." The middle-aged man invited Han Li to the back once he finished speaking. Han Li nodded his head and silently entered. To his surprise, it led to a warehouse with all sorts of cabinets and trunks placed all over. The walls were particularly filled to the brim. The middle-aged man stepped forward and walked in front of a wood cabinet. He gently pushed one of the corners, causing 2 of the adjacent cabinets to separate and reveal a stairway. The middle-aged shopkeeper led the way and explained, "Out of fear that occasional guests would sense any restriction, we had a mechanism placed from the mortal realm." Han Li didn't feel particularly surprised by this. The middle-aged man then stepped on the tile and caused a wall to open with a muffled creak, revealing an eerie passageway down. The shopkeeper stood to the side and smiled. "This junior doesn't have the qualifications to enter. Senior must go on his own. Hong Li frowned and swept his spiritual sense downwards and felt faint spiritual chi fluctuations in the passageway. When he examined further, he found a layer of restrictions there, but Hong Li was able to judge it with his spell formation knowledge to be a simple spirit obstruction barrier. Although Hong Li could forcefully break through it, the people within it would be sure to notice it. Hong Li revealed slight hesitation. Although he was sure that the Heaven Peak sect elder would try anything foolish within Soaring Heaven City, he didn't wish to enter a sealed area with someone whom he didn't know was friend or foe. As Hong Li hesitated, the people from within formation seemed to guess what Hong Li thinking. A moment later, the barrier was removed, allowing Hong Li's spiritual sense to see within. Hong Li's heart stirred at the deliberate show of trust, and he was amazed by what he discovered. It's him! That as a surprise, Hong Li muttered to himself and walked down the passage without any further hesitation. When the middle-aged man saw that Hong Li descended, he sealed the passage and returned the cabinets to normal before going back to tend to the shop. The passage was very long, and descended about 100 meters deep to preserve its secret of nature. Eventually, Hong Li saw the light from within the darkness and knew that he had arrived at an exit. He quickened his pace and found himself in a stone room. The room was rather large, but it was completely empty apart from a few praying mats. Facing its entrance were two men that were sitting cross-legged on such a mat. They both looked at Hong Li with a smile. Hong Li remained silent, choosing first to find an empty prayer mat to sit on. Hong Li smiled to one of the two and returned the smile. I absolutely didn't think that fellow Taoist would find me. It is truly a surprise to find you here. This person wore a tall crown and blue robes. Marquis Nanlong wryly smiled and said, truly, even I found it difficult to believe that I had escaped calamity. When we separated, I believed I had escaped, but they had tracked me down using a secret technique. They had caught up to me at the edge of the Mulan plains. However, the heavens favor the persistent, and I later found a group of high-grade spell warriors that were looking for us. In the resulting confusion, I was able to fortunately return as my pursuers were vastly slowed down by the spell warriors. After that was said, a hidden intensity appeared on his face. His face was far more pale than Hong Li had remembered and his eyes were listless. He must have suffered much damage to his vitality. Of course, the person by his side was the old white-robed Heaven Peak sect elder he had met earlier. Fellow Taoist Nanlong has earned my appreciation from being able to escape under those circumstances. But should Brother Nanlong be resting in his cave residence rather than urgently finding me? There was no hesitation either to send a disciple to bother my concubine. I am at somewhat of a loss. Hong Li's smile faded away and there was faint annoyance in his tone. He. Fellow Taoist misunderstands. I only did it because I had no choice. Fellow Taoist should know there are now people pursuing us. This secret plan was to escape their notice. This is fellow Taoist J. Pearl of the Heaven Peak sect, a friend I would trust my life with. He was originally to come with us on the last treasure hunt, but it was a pity that he was occupied with sect matters at the time. Marquis Nanlong's attitude towards Hong Li had entirely changed from when he first saw him. It was no much more respectful. It seemed that he was deeply moved when he saw Hong Li killing another nascent soul cultivator. At that moment, the white-robed old man chuckled and saluted Hong Li. He spoke with a regretful tone. If my methods have offended you, I hope fellow Taoist Hong Wan Ti take it to heart. It was the only way. Hong Li waved his hand and said, it's fine. Since there was a reason, I'll let it go. However, did fellow Taoist Nanlong seek me out because or something from the jade box? Marquis Nanlong solemnly said, fellow Taoist guessed right. According to my sources, the Ghost Spirit sect paid a heavy price to bribe our previous party members. They are determined to acquire Master Song Kun's map and method to enter Devillfall Valley. Fellow Taoist Hong just happened to acquire one of the items needed to enter Devillfall Valley. When combined with my map, we will be able to avoid a majority of dangers in the valley, allowing you to acquire the treasure. Something soon came to Hong Li's mind, an item essential to entering Devillfall Valley. Do you mean the black ring? Marquis Nanlong grew excited and a bit of color returned to his complexion. The Heaven-Earth ring is true within Hong Li's possession. This is great. The Heaven-Earth ring? Hong Li frowned and felt the name to be somewhat familiar. He suddenly grew alarmed and looked towards Marquis Nanlong. He bewilderedly asked, the Heaven-Earth rings that wise one refined from meteor iron. I heard that ordinary, the ring doesn't possess great ability, but when it came across Great Earth Essence Light, it is able to control the Essence Light to kill others and become formless. It is considered a magic treasure of little interest. Fellow Taoist is truly knowledgeable. It is precisely that item. The Heaven-Earth rings are divided into Yin and Yang. The Yin rings are able to protect oneself from Essence Light, while the Yang rings are able to control the Essence Light to attack. Fellow Taoist Han should be in possession of the Yin ring. Originally, Master Tsang Kun drew assistance from the ring and managed to pass through the valley's Essence Light area unscathed. To my knowledge, although there are other methods to pass through the Great Earth Essence Light, but it would require an extensive formation placed down by many cultivators or treasures that are lost or incapable of being acquired. Fellow Taoist means Han only glanced at the two and began to ponder about the dangers and what there was to be gained.